Y'all, it's almost the end of the year, and Wizard101 has had a gigantic year in terms of updates. So today, I wanted to do an honest review of Wizard101's 24. There were good things that happened, pretty bad things that happened, lessons to be learned. But I will say this, I firmly believe if they take everything that they did that actually worked this year and apply it to future updates, this game will only get bigger and better. So starting right off, this year was already very, very weird because we had an extremely rare thing that happened with the January update. The Wallaroo update was literally so gigantic that they actually had to split it into two parts, where they released most of it in December, but then this year, January saw the final Dungeon of Wallaroo release. Now, I'm gonna be honest, a lot of people looked at that January update in a very controversial way. They came out with new gear, the Reaver set and the Stalker set, that looked like a lot of work for a very, very minor gear upgrade. Compared to the Aeon set, which was the level 160 gear, you would have to basically grind all through Wallaroo, do a final dungeon that at the very beginning of its rollout was actually very difficult. And you did all of that for robes and hats and boots. They gave some cool item cards, yes, but very, very modest increases in damage, pierce, and resist. Like, we're talking 1 to 2 maximum. I think that January update, the Nightmare Dungeon update, I had two big takeaways from it. One, I actually think that I would prefer if they did what they did with the rollout of that update with more big updates. I actually liked the pacing of it. Yeah, I guess in December, the world felt a little incomplete, but to me, there's something about getting content, especially like, you know, stuff that will keep you busy in smaller bite-sized pieces rather than really huge, grindy, big chunks. I don't know, there's something about that that I actually appreciated, and I think it made the Wallaroo update better for me personally. However, I think what I feel and what most players feel is that when you do have big updates, the rewards for those updates need to feel like they're worth the wait and the time that you grind. Something that nobody really, I guess, could have seen coming back when Wallaroo was coming out was that they weren't actually going to increase the level cap and introduce level 180 gear in the next update either. So with the Selenopolis update that just came out, right, this is the other big update for the year. We've had new gear that's so similar to Reaver gear that it's also similarly not worth the time to grind for most people. While the actual amount of PvE content has been literally massive this update, I think one thing they fell really, really short with was gear. Let's look at the majority of people that play Wizard101. They're trying to PvE, they're trying to, like, you know, do new things every year. And it's a lot harder to do that when you feel like going through an entire new world barely gives you even a slight damage increase. In future updates, I think if they can't justify giving us pure damage, they have to find other ways to make gear feel like it's worth going for. Maybe they could do this with, like, you know, looking into gear set bonuses, so you could maybe find some ways to, like, eke out some extra value out of your gear. They could do this with item cards. Maybe they could do it with just cosmetic gear, which I've seen them start to do, but maybe do more of that. But that big January update was followed by the Arc 2 Spellman update that really shook things up for PvP and PvE. A lot of people look at Spellmans, and what they really see is just cards with new symbols when they never used to have those symbols to begin with. But I think that's a super simplistic way of looking at this whole Spellman system. I think every Spellman update that they've ever put out has only added options for both people in PvP, and even when it comes to AoEs and things like that, people in PvE. I think every year should get an update like the R2 Spellman update. I think what it did for the game was actually extremely underrated. But once again, for a lot of people, I think this update just seemed like an extension of all the other Spellman updates that they had a problem with. And why would people have a problem with Spellman updates? Because you have to grind to get Spellmans. You have to either farm stuff like crazy, you have to open a bunch of cantrip chests with other people. I think ever since the rollout of the Spellman update itself, updates like the one in June or July, whenever the R2 Spellman update was, they've been held back by the grind that it takes just to unlock the options that Spellmans provide. I think they're obviously getting better about this. It's way easier to farm for lore Spellmans, for example, this year compared to last year. They finally finished their rollout of all the gold key bosses that drop lore spells, so you don't have to just open up packs for them. While we've seen progress there, I still feel like this game is severely lacking in sources for Spellman drop. I would love to live in a world where you could fish, garden, PvP, pet derby, I don't care what activity. I would love to see a world where all of those give you Spellman. I think they're really gonna need to look into that. It doesn't have to be a ton of Spellmans, but I feel like it's stupid that there's so many ways to spend time playing this game, and yet the most repetitive and tedious ones are the only ways to get these Spellmen. I'd love to see that with, like, event Spellmans and Arc 1 and Arc 2 Spellmans, stuff that you basically just have to do the same one grindy repetitive activity to get. And finally, the most recent update, probably one of the biggest Wizard101 updates to date, the Krokotopia area retexture and the unveiling of Selenopolis. I think for PvP, this Spell Fusion update has been one of the best things that they've ever done for the game. I gotta give them full props for that. And I don't think anyone's acting like an entire retexture of the entire world in an update of this size was easy for them to do. I think they slammed it out of the park. I really think this should be one of the best updates we will ever see. I really feel that way. My only problem is that most of these Spell Fusions have very, very little, like, you know, ability to be applied outside of very situational PvP scenarios, right? Like, I could justify using any fusion spell from any of these new trees in any PvP match, maybe, you know, like, I could actually justify packing it. But even the spell fusions that let you make AoEs in this update aren't good for PvE. I'm sure they'll end up doing this, but in my opinion, they need to add more spell fusion formulas, and in every update that they do, maybe add one that's more PvP oriented, add one that's more PvE oriented. It doesn't even have to be allowed in PvP. Even if it isn't allowed in PvP, getting people to engage with the system, I think it'll really show people where the future of Wiz is headed, right? It's not just about your school, it's about what you can do by combining another school and using different strengths that are available to us that have never been available. And I do think there's something really exciting about that, because I genuinely feel like this is the first update that we've had where the possibilities are dead ass endless. And if you have a system where you have all those possibilities, it makes no sense to me why only PvP players really get to experience. I really do hope that they take the feedback seriously, that some PvE players do feel left out of a lot of these more complicated updates, like Spellman updates, like big dungeons with challenge modes, like Spell Fusion. Because while I dig the ambition to make things really cool and complex and, you know, like increasing, like, you know, what you can do with spells in general, you can't leave off that audience. And next year, y'all, I feel like they're going to be very, very busy with the console release. I think it's a fair assumption that the console release is going to happen at some point in 2025. Not to mention, if they're next year, if they're planning anything close to as big as this specific Selenopolis update, we're looking at tons of new content that hopefully more and more people can enjoy, feel valued for spending time on. But it's definitely been a better year than most. I can say that very, very honestly, and I hope most people agree with that. Y'all, let me know what you guys liked about this year on Wizard101, what you guys want to see next year on Wizard101. Drop a like if you enjoyed, leave us up if you're new, and as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome. See y'all soon. And yeah.